Today we're focusing on special angle pairs that are formed by a transversal. So we first have to investigate what a transversal is and why it's special. So first, parallel lines are two lines that never intersect. And a transversal is a line that intersects a system of lines. And so just remember that a system is when you have two or more lines. So if you have two lines drawn, whether they intersect or not, and if you draw a third line that intersects them, that third line is going to be called a transversal. Now what's special is that when parallel lines are intersected by a transversal, there are 8 angles that are formed, which means there are 4 pairs, and each pair is congruent, which just means that they have the same measure. So the first pair of angles that are formed are called vertical angles. Vertical angles are angles that are located opposite each other on intersecting lines. Actually, before I get there, I should point out, so here are my parallel lines, and then they're being intersected by this line here. So in this picture, this green line would be my transversal. And you can see that it's forming 8 angles. And so we're going to investigate all the different types of angle pairs that are formed by that. Let me just get rid of this. So the first set is going to be vertical angles. So they're located opposite each other on intersecting lines. So my first set of vertical angles would be angles 8 and 5. And that would just mean that 8 and 5 are going to have the same measure. Then I also have vertical angles 6 and 7, which means 6 and 7 would also have the same measure. Then I've also got 4 and 1. And then my last set of vertical angles would be 2 and 3. So for example, if I knew that angle 2 is 30 degrees, that would mean that angle 3 is also 30 degrees because they're vertical. My next set of special angles is going to be called corresponding angles, which means they're in the same spot. So I like to think of this as the same room but in a different house. So for example, if this was one house with 4 rooms inside of it, and then let's say this was a different house with 4 rooms inside of it, I'd want to know which rooms match up with each other. So one set of matching rooms might be room number 1 would match up with room number 5. So those are going to be my corresponding angles. And the reason that's important is they're going to have the same measure. So if angle 1 measured 120 degrees, that would mean that angle 5 would also measure 120 degrees. Let's do one more before you do one on your own. So let's say I took room number 2, that's going to match up with room number 6. So those would be my corresponding angles. Pause the video to see if you can fill in the last 2 pairs of corresponding angles. You can also use colored pencils to note them. Press play when you're ready to check your answers. So my last 2 pairs of corresponding angles are 4 and 8 and 3 and 7. And so each of these colors would mean that they all have 2 and 6 have the same measure, 4 and 8, 3 and 7, 1 and 5. The next set of special angles that's formed by a transversal are called alternate exterior angles, sorry. So exterior means outside, and alternate means opposite sides of the transversal. So the first thing is, I'm actually going to focus on the exterior part first. So if I use my parallel lines, and I look at the angles that are outside of the parallel lines, those are angles 8, 7, 2, and 1. Think of them like train tracks. Like if this was train tracks, then this would be in between the train tracks, and 8, 7, 2, and 1 would be outside the train tracks. Now the alternate part means that they have to be on opposite sides of this transversal. So 8 and 7 are on the opposite side, 2 and 1 are on the opposite side. But they also have to have the same measure. So 8 and 7 clearly look different sizes. So the angles that are going to match up here are actually going to be 8 and 1, and then 2 and 7, because they are outside the parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal, and they have the same measure. So this actually only has 2. So I've got 1 and 8, and 2 and 7 are my alternate exterior angles. Next, we're going to do alternate interior angles. So this time, the interior part means the angles have to be inside the parallel lines. So this time I'm talking about angles 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are in between the train tracks. They're still alternate, so they have to be on opposite sides of the transversal, but they also have to have the same measure. So 6 and 3 are the two pairs that would match up there, and then the other pair of alternate interior angles would be 4 and 5. So 3 and 6, and 4 and 5. And then I can cross out these two. So those are my 4 sets of angles that are formed by a transversal. I had vertical, like 8 and 5 and 6 and 7. I had corresponding, like 8 and 4 and 7 and 3. Then I had alternate exterior, so outside the parallel lines opposite, so like 8 and 1 here. And then I have alternate interior, which is highlighted in this picture. There's one last set of angles, although these ones are not congruent, meaning they don't have the same measure, but they are supplementary. And those are 2 angles or more that add up to 180 degrees. They form a straight line. And so if I can see on this one, I can see that angles 7 and 8, they form a straight line together. They form this line here. So that would be a pair of supplementary angles, 7 and 8. I might also pick angles 3 and 1. They also form a straight line. So what I would like you to do is pause the video to fill in 1, 2, 3, 4 more pairs of supplementary angles. There's actually more than that to pick from. Pause the video, press play when you're ready to check your answers. And so I've just listed the remaining ones here. 5 and 6 form a straight line, they're supplementary. 3 and 4, 1 and 2, and that could also go in this direction. 2 and 4, 6 and 8, 5 and 7. Any pairs of those would be considered supplementary. So now we're going to use these angle pairs to find missing measures. So for example, I'm being told that lines A and B are parallel. They're being intersected by C, which is a transversal, which means all of those special angle pairs have been formed. And they're giving me one of my angle measures. So if this is 60, then angle 6 would also be 60 because they're vertical. And if angle 6 is 60, then I could say that angle 2 is also 60. And there's 2 reasons I could say that. One is I could say that it's alternate exterior with this original angle here, or these two are corresponding. Either way, angle 2 is still 60 degrees, which would make angle 3 60 degrees because these two are vertical, or these two are alternate interior, or these two are corresponding. So there's all different reasons why these angles are going to be the measures that they are. Then I could also go back and get angle 8 because these two angles form a straight line, which means they have to add to 180. So that would make angle 8 120 degrees. And then if angle 8 is 120, angle 5 is also 120. And then angle 1 is also 120. And then angle 4 is also 120. So just by having that one angle measure, I was able to get the remaining 7. You're going to try this one. You're being given that this angle right here is 75 degrees. Pause the video to fill in the missing angle measures. Press play when you're ready to check your answers. So in this case, since they told me that this angle was 75 degrees, that means E, D, and A are all also 75 degrees, and that B, C, F, and G are all 105 degrees because I need these to add up to 180. So now we're going to do some transversal practice. And so what's important to know here is that each of these problems does not connect to the previous one. So for example, if angle 1 is 110, it's asking us for angle D. And so that means from this list here, I'm going to pick the relationship about angles 1 and D. So I'm noticing that they're inside the parallel lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. So that means they are alternate interior angles. And alternate interior angles means they have the same measure. So that means that angle D would also be 110 degrees. Angle A, now I'm going to reset and pretend this problem never happened. Angle A, if angle A is 136, what's the measure of angle 4? So I'm going to pick the correct relationship. They are on opposite sides of the transversal and outside the parallel lines. So these are alternate exterior, which means they have the same measure, and so that means angle 4 would be 136 degrees. So now you're going to try examples 3, 4, and 5. Pause the video, press play when you're ready to check your answers. So if angle 3 is 30 degrees, then C is also 30 degrees. They are corresponding. If B is 25 degrees, then C is also 25 degrees. They are vertical. And if 2 is 45 degrees, then 4 is 135 because they are supplementary, so they have to add to 180. Page 6, if you haven't had a chance yet, you're going to finish this for homework, and we're going to check these answers the next day.